on Parliament Hill. We want to make sure that our students have the tools to do that, and if they want to be involved in the advocacy process, I'm more than willing to be on their side with that and make sure that they have all the necessary tools to be successful.
Thank you. Mr. Wright, did you have any questions for Ms. Carter?
I was under this.
Or any rebuttal, sorry?
Oh,
or would you like to move right into answering the question?
Oh, I was understanding that was answering the question. But, okay,
I'm sorry?
I was under the impression that I was answering the question, but...
Okay, well, certainly go right ahead.
Okay,
question you have.
Yeah, I think the big issue with advocacy right now is that people don't quite understand fully what it is, and it needs to be connected with the results of advocacy. The 30% off tuition grant, credit transfer, rather. Those are results that have come directly from advocacy. And it's to address the off-campus question, whether students on campus can advocate for things off campus. I think you can't build that barrier between on and off campus all the time. I think you've got to burst that Western bubble a little bit and really bring together students with off-campus advocates as well, to kind of build those community relationships and get students out in the city and because we do share a lot of mutual interests, so having students advocate for those as well is important in any kind of discussion about advocacy. So.
All right, thank you. Do you have any response? Okay, we're going to move right to the next question, and I'm going to try a little harder to read it correctly, so I'm rehearsing this one. Mr. Wright, you'll be the first one to respond to this one. According to a recent poll on the USC website, 66% of over 3,000 respondents are of the opinion that post-secondary education should be free. Do you agree with your constituents? Should tuition be free?
In the current environment that we're operating in, I don't think it's realistic to say that tuition should be free. I think students have to pay towards the end goals that that tuition and schooling really get. Tuition and schooling to some extent is an investment in your future. That's not to say that it is solely an investment, but I think to say that tuition should be free is a little unrealistic.
Thank you, Ms. Carter. Any responses?
I'll just respond and not rebut. These are not too controversial yet. In theory, yeah, I believe that tuition should be free and that post-secondary education should be accessible to all students. The point that I'm kind of seeing where Steve's getting at is that to get that and to have post-secondary education be free within this government would be near to impossible. In theory, it's fantastic. Unfortunately, funding is being cut to universities. This is a problem that we've been seeing over the course of many years. Our university institutions are becoming increasingly more privatized. I would really prefer if we could have a tax system in place in Canada where we could have free access to post-secondary education. No matter what, that will always be on the back of my mind when I'm advocating, especially at CASA. If there is a way that I can see that we can advocate to have free tuition for all students, I don't think that would be anything but beneficial for students in Canada. Everybody needs to receive an education.
Thank you. All right. Do you have a response, or may we move to the next question? Okay, moving along to the next question. Ms. Carter, you will be the first to respond. You've both spoken a lot about USA, don't we know it? But it's only one part of the role of Vice President External. What else do you bring to the position of Vice President External aside from USA? How many times can we work that into the question? For example, talking about per credit tuition, which if you talk to some of the student senators is potentially dangerous. I'm not reading the last bit. Just kidding, love right back anonymously. Ms. Carter.
I'm going to focus on the first part of that question because per credit tuition is kind of an USA initiative. So outside of USA, my focus, I'm not shy about it, my focus is definitely going to be municipal advocacy. I think that it's really important that students are involved municipally. There are tons of ways that we can do this. I think that my experience as King's president has allowed me to foster some very, very important connections to the city. I really want to see the USC that builds a continuing relationship with the city. I want to be able to call up our city councilors and say, hey, Joni Beckler, how you doing? How was your day? What's going on in city council? Instead of, hey, Joni, we need to do this, and how can we get it done? And I think that if we foster this type of relationship with our city councilors and with those who work in the city, we are going to have an excellent footing to be lobbying and advocating on behalf of students. There's going to be a lot of visible improvements that can be made municipally, such as our new seat on the LTC advisory committee, and I really hope to be able to utilize the connections and the friendships that I've made in my role this year to help make Western students' lives a lot better.
Thank you, Mr. Wright. Your response?
As far as like bringing past experience to the portfolio, I think as far my experience goes in residence, it's really that community development atmosphere and that community development experience. I think working municipally is something that the USC has targeted as a priority, which is something that we should be moving in that kind of direction. And that community involvement, that community experience, I can really bring to the table as far as that goes. And that moves also into consultation with other groups. As far as I know, my role as standing committee, we've brought other students in to really get feedback and opinion, and that really is bolstered by that community development experience, just getting a bunch of people in the room and talking about those kind of issues.
All right, thank you. All right, moving along to the next question. Mr. Wright, you'll be the first to respond. Are there any specific community partners that you'd like to see the external portfolio collaborate with in London?
Yeah, the London Arts Council is something that I'd really like to see us go towards. The city just received, there's a $40 million initiative for music arts that London is looking to collaborate on and really use to create that community culture in the city. I think the USC has a really opportunity to work with that and kind of bring musicians and bring artists out into the city and do the opposite in bringing musicians and local artists from London into the UCC.
Thank you, Ms. Carter.
The first community partner that comes to mind that I've been working with this year actually is Youth Opportunities Unlimited, and this goes along with how I would like to expand the Good Neighbor campaign. Youth Opportunities Unlimited provides training on the site job training for youth who are in need. It provides subsidized housing. I'm actually working with them now to do some charity work and bring King students over to YOU to help them with their Meals on Wheels program. I would love to extend that to USC. I think that it's a great initiative. Another community partner off the top of my mind is the Boys and Girls Club of London, who I'm aware has been helping us with the early outreach campaign. I would really like to kind of foster a relationship with the Boys and Girls Club and see if we can foster some relationships between the youth that are in need in London and help to connect them to some student leaders and students at Western.
All right, thank you. Ms. Carter, you'll be the first to respond to the next question, and just as a warning, we're going to be moving right out, so there's a lot that you can take with this, and it's, what is your single biggest priority in the external portfolio in the greater metropolitan area of London? It's not a greater metropolitan area.
As in, what's the most important thing that I want to do in the City of London?
Yes, your number one.
My number one is going to be building relationships. And I know that that is something that is very broad, but I think that it is something that is very, very important. The Good Neighbor campaign has started to do this, but I think that we can do it much better and we can definitely improve upon doing that. I think that it's about time that we go out into the community and have a conversation with those who work in government, the police department, and that we make sure that we have positive relationships with these people because they are the ones who enable us to do our jobs. And I think that if we as students reach out and make an effort to be connected to the municipality, we build those relationships, we're going to have a much stronger foot to stand on in terms of lobbying. One of the most important things that I want to do with my platform is ride-alongs for student leaders to make sure that we are building relationships with the London Police, to make sure that when Project Learn is being reevaluated, that we have educated and involved students who will be able to critically analyze the process and provide some really good discussion.
Thank you.
Single biggest priority I have is bursting the Western bubble, and what I mean by that is getting students out into the city and bringing the students back to here. CHRW has a great program right now called the Friends of CHRW card, which I think could really be bolstered. It could really be more well known in the community and at Western. So we need to break down the barriers that are between us and the city, really get students beyond Richmond Row, and get students beyond the UCC into the city. This means working with community partners. This means bringing artists and other organizations into the UCC on a weekly basis. So.
All right, thank you. Now the next question is going to go to Mr. Wright. Why do you see your priority as more important than Ms. Carter's?
I see mine as more important because advocacy and making a municipal advocacy a really important priority is more than just working with city councilors. It's more than just the high level stuff. It really takes students getting out into their communities, and it's more than just interacting with councilors. It's about students interacting with their local businesses and interacting with leaders out in the community as well.
Thank you, Ms. Carter.
I would like to disagree with that a little bit, because building relationships with community partners is what will allow us to advocate. It's what will give Western a positive image in the eyes of the City of London. And yeah, I agree, we need to have community partners outside City Council. That was the example that came to mind for me. But I think that building relationships is the first step so that we have a solid foundation from which to advocate. If we go to talk about Project Learn with the London Police, we better be educated, and we better have taken the time to talk to those who work with that program every day, to make sure that we have a large understanding of the whole picture, and to make sure that we are taking everything into account to make sure that we can get the best possible results for students.
All right. The next question is we answered by Ms. Carter first. A lot of the issues that both slates have brought to attention across the portfolios involve allocation of limited resources and funding. Please explain how each of you, in the role of VP External, would tackle this problem of scarcity.
I think I've touched on this a little bit already, that we know that funding to universities is decreasing. This is both an external problem and an internal problem. Internally, from my slate's point of view, we have to make sure that the USC is always critically analyzing where its money is being spent and making sure that students are getting the best possible deal for the money. They pay a lot of money to the USC, and we have to make sure of that. Externally, it's a lot more difficult. It's making sure that we go and we use our connections federally, and that we show the government why post-secondary education is important and why we need more funding, because scarcity is always going to be an issue. Unfortunately, we have to work within the confines of that barrier and do the best that we can, but I think that if we're always critically evaluating where we're spending our money, making sure it's in the best interest of students, I think that we'll be able to navigate that barrier very well.
Thank you. Mr. Wright?
With the issue of scarcity, you always have to work with what you have, but at the same time advocate to get more. And speaking to that first thought, you need to be thoughtful. You need to be deliberative with every kind of decision that you make, whether it's an event or it's any kind of initiative. You really need to do your due diligence in deciding whether that's going to be, you're going to get the best bang for your buck in that case. Speaking to that second point, you need to advocate for having stronger, more funding towards certain initiatives to help you out in that regard.
All right, thank you. Moving along to the next question. As a member of the Early Outreach Committee, I'm interested in hearing your opinions on this program. What is your goal for this initiative, Mr. Wright?
Biggest thing I see with the early outreach program is getting students at the most critical time, which research shows is around grade 7 and grade 8. because that is when they really make the decision on whether they are attending post-secondary education, which is what is in our best interest to get as many students into post-secondary as we can, and making sure that it's really accessible. One of the biggest priorities with the early outreach program is financial education. One of the biggest barriers to these students making their decisions on whether to go to post-secondary education is ideas on whether they can afford it or not. And unfortunately, there's a lot of miscommunication as far as that goes. So the biggest initiative for the early outreach program for me is making sure that students know that OSAP exists, know that all of these financial accessibility programs do exist, and that they can make use of them.
Thank you. Ms. Carter?
I actually got to speak to Elizabeth, who is the Early Outreach Commissioner right now, and I really liked being able to talk to her because she had a very similar vision to the Early Outreach program that I wanted to see, and that's making it a little bit more long-term. So I would love to see the USC develop some mentorship programs to have student leaders from Western go and talk to students in grade 8 and grade 10. Those are usually the grades that are targeted right now with early outreach, and have a conversation with them. Steve's right, it's definitely about educating students and telling them that they can, because a lot of the times students who are faced with financial barriers to education are told that they can't. So, I mean, I'm on OSAP, I rely on it to be in school, and I was lucky enough to have the education, and I think that every student needs to be able to have that. So if we're able to develop some long-term partnerships, our students will learn a lot, but also the grade 8s and grade 10s in London's will learn a lot, and hopefully we can encourage some people that they can't do it, and that they can't get an education, and hopefully we can help them to do that.
Thank you. All right. Okay, we're going to move along to the next question, and this one is regarding provincial differentiation. For those, could I get a quick show of hands from the audience of those who have never heard of the concept of differentiation as it results with the new strategic mandate agreement? Okay, we have a couple going on. All right.